Hello world, this is Truthful. In this channel, we invest in truth. If you read Capital, Volume 1 by Karl Marx, and go to the part 7 of this Volume 1, and Chapter 25, the General Law of Capitalist Accumulation. At the end of this chapter, look at the references given here. The reference number 24 states, quote, "Poverty seems favorable to generation." End of quote. Marx claims this is a quote from Adam Smith, and then goes on to criticize some other people here. But this quote is terribly manipulative. I'll come to that. But let's see this quote in the text, where it stands. Here it reads, "The third category of the relative surplus population, the stagnant, forms a part of the active labor army, but with extremely irregular employment. Hence it furnishes to capital an inexhaustible reservoir of disposable labor power. Its conditions of life sink below the average normal level of the working class. This makes it at once the broad basis of special branches of capitalist exploitation. It is characterized by maximum of working time and minimum of wages. We have learned to know its chief form under the rubric of domestic industry. It recruits itself constantly from the supernumerary forces of modern industry and agriculture, and specially from those decaying branches of industry where handicraft is yielding to manufacture, manufacture to machinery. Its extent grows, as with the extent and energy of accumulation. The creation of a surplus population advances. But it forms at the same time a self-reproducing and self-perpetuating element of the working class, taking a proportionally greater part in the general increase of that class than the other elements. In fact, not only the number of births and deaths, but the absolute size of the families stand in inverse proportion to the height of wages, and therefore to the amount of means of subsistence of which the different categories of laborers dispose. This law of capitalistic society would sound absurd to savages, or even civilized colonists. It calls to mind the boundless reproduction of animals, individually weak and constantly hunted down." And then he gives the reference here. And let's check what Adam Smith wrote before the commentary. In his book, Wealth of Nations, first book, in chapter 8, there are these passages. Quote, "Is this improvement in the circumstances of the lower ranks of the people to be regarded as an advantage or as an inconveniency to the society?" The answer seems at first sight abundantly plain. Servants, laborers, and workmen of different kinds make up the far greater part of every great political society. But what improves the circumstances of the greater part can never be regarded as an inconveniency to the whole. No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. It is but equity, besides, that they who feed, clothe, and lodge the whole body of the people should have such a share of the produce of their own labor as to be themselves tolerably well fed, clothed, and lodged. And on this part, it reads, "Poverty, though it no doubt discourages, doesn't always prevent marriage. Seems even to be favorable to generation. A half-starved Highland woman frequently bears more than 20 children, while a pampered fine lady is often incapable of bearing any, and is generally exhausted by 2 or 3. Barrenness, so frequent among women of fashion, is very rare among those of inferior station. Luxury in the fair sex, while it inflames perhaps the passion for enjoyment, seems always to weaken and frequently to destroy altogether the powers of generation. But poverty, though it doesn't prevent the generation, is extremely unfavorable to the rearing of children. The tender plant is produced, but in so cold a soil and so severe a climate, soon withers and dies. It's not uncommon, I have been frequently told, in the highlands of Scotland, for a mother who has borne 20 children not to have two alive. Several officers of great experience have assured me that so far from recruiting their regiment, they have never been able to supply it with drums and fifes from all the soldiers' children that were born in it. A greater number of fine children, however, is seldom seen anywhere than about a barrack of soldiers. Very few of them, it seems, arrive at the age of 13 or 14. In some places, one half the children born die before they are 4 years of age, in many places before they are 7, and in almost all places before they are 9 or 10. If you read the passage from Karl Marx, it is about this surplus population constituting a basis for the exploitation of people. And then if you read how he claims to be referencing to Adam Smith, he says, poverty seems favorable to generation. You might think that Adam Smith is actually supporting this poverty, seeing it as a good thing. I mean, it's favorable to generation, right? But this is actually not how Adam Smith writes it. Here he clearly says, no society can surely be flourishing and happy, of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. And then he goes on to analyze, in his own terms, how the market reacts to the supply of labor as a natural occurrence. In the next page, Adam Smith writes, the liberal reward of labor, therefore, as it is the effect of increasing wealth, so it is the cause of increasing population. To complain of it is to lament over the necessary effect and cause of the greatest public prosperity. So here Adam Smith clearly defines the greatest public prosperity as the liberal reward of labor. So Adam Smith is not for poverty. Adam Smith is for growth and for prosperity. For him, free market is going to do it. People are going to pick the jobs where there is demand and where supply is lacking. It will be rewarding for them to employ themselves in those spheres. So this way, the needs will be met in nation and around the globe, for that matter. When something is oversupplied or there is not much demand for it anymore, people will move to another sphere where there is a need arising. In this way, he explains how things will be efficient. We are not living in a liberal world. The world we're living, in economic terms, has liberal aspects, but it has dominantly Keynesian aspects and mercantilist aspects as well. We are far from liberalism. Whether free market achieves it or not is regardless of his intentions. His intentions here are not bad. He's not for poverty. He sees economy as a natural phenomenon. He analyzes it as an observer and he makes his conclusions. This doesn't mean that he has got it perfect. He has figured it all. No, he's got some main problems. People are not always that rational, and there is class struggle. He is aware of class struggle in his book. Adam Smith is aware of class struggle. He mentions it, actually, even though he doesn't dwell on the topic. And he's having a hard time figuring out how to deal with public spending, how taxation should be done. A country needs roads, national security, public education. Well, he mentions doctors, but he forgets about public health care. So there's a lot of criticisms you can direct towards Adam Smith, and you should. However, this doesn't qualify you framing him for something he is not. Essentially, here Adam Smith says poverty, though it no doubt discourages, does not always prevent marriage. It seems even to be favorable to generation, and Marx just quotes him as poverty seems favorable to generation. Now, if Marx was quoting, it seems even to be favorable to generation, he should have put poverty in brackets. If he doesn't do it, then he should have used the previous sentence as well. He clearly picks poverty from the previous sentence, and he gets rid of the part even to be. There's a huge difference between saying poverty seems favorable to generation and poverty seems even to be favorable to generation, because there's a contrast here. When you say even to be, it's despite something. So he gets rid of this part. It's not just Marx gets this sentence out of its whole context. He also changes the sentence, and he doesn't use brackets there either. He could have put it, brackets, poverty, seems, and then brackets, and then favorable to generation. But then you would know there is some parts missing here. You would go and check what Adam Smith actually wrote. If you trust Karl Marx, then you will believe this is what Adam Smith actually wrote. Poverty seems favorable to generation. This is a very manipulative way of quoting someone. This is demagoguery because it plays with people's feelings towards poverty and attempts to frame Adam Smith as someone who supports poverty, even though in reality Adam Smith is against poverty. You may say, what's the big deal? It's just a quote. It doesn't matter much. He might not even have intended to frame him or... No, he intended to do it. After wrongly quoting Adam Smith by saying poverty seems favorable to generation, Karl Marx moves on to say, oh, this is even a specially wise arrangement of God. He mocks him. I read Capital before reading Wealth of Nations. When you reach this point in the book, Marx has already mocked many economists as political economists, as people who support the bourgeois, and they don't understand anything. They don't even understand multiplication. They're not scientific. They're just making things up. Things like that, okay? Marx says, oh, they are doing all this just to serve the bourgeois class. They're not sincere at all. They're just puppets. He goes on like this. So when you reach this point in the book and you see this quote, poverty seems favorable to generation. If you didn't read Adam Smith, you are thinking, oh, look at this Adam Smith. Wow, he supports poverty. He thinks poverty is good because, well, this is how the bourgeois class exploits people. My favorite class, yay. Which is far from reality. If you ask me, well, Marx is a disappointment before anything else. Okay? I read this whole book, more than 1,500 pages. Apart from criticism of capitalism, which everyone does, there was no solution. It is not there. So Marx wanted to solve the biggest problems of economics, but he didn't. His followers pretended that he did. Since he doesn't want negotiations in a free market, he needs a way to measure value. And to do it, he is basically counting labor. What he did, in a sense, is being an accountant of labor, human labor to be specific. If machine does it, then there is a button, you press it, you earned it as the human being. You pressed the button. Machine only produces its depreciation. It counts for its depreciation. So whatever added value is there, it's because of your labor. Well, this is going to change with now artificial general intelligence and robots. If there is no more human labor, Marxist theories are completely irrelevant. But anyway, he's doing this accounting of human labor. But he says if something has no use value, then that thing cannot have economic value. So whatever produced it doesn't count as labor. It's not a useful labor, it's useless labor. It doesn't count as labor. When you read it, you are like, oh, this is not so romantic. This is very realistic. It makes sense. But now there's a hole, a huge hole in his theory. How are you going to solve this problem of measuring every value in terms of labor, if not all labor is equal? Later on, he defines socially required labor as an average, as a social average to produce something. But this has many problems. Whichever sample of population you take, there will be huge deviations from the general average. And then technology keeps advancing, and you need to count for that. Marx actually takes his labor theory of value from Adam Smith. When you look at it, you will see that Adam Smith's labor theory of value is actually more complete than what Marx has. It is interesting, isn't it? Well, it is because Marx needs to measure economic value outside of the market. He's against bargaining. He doesn't want negotiations because class struggle creates asymmetrical things. Power is asymmetrically distributed, so it causes problems, unfairness. It is the truth. So he goes, let's get rid of the market. What are we going to do? We're going to plan everything. How are we going to plan everything in an economy? We need to be able to measure value. How are we going to measure value? Well, let's measure value in terms of labor, human labor. He runs into a problem in the very first chapter. Let me actually find this and read this, all right? This is actually end of the section 1 of the chapter 1 of the volume 1. Marx says, lastly, nothing can have value without being an object of utility. If the thing is useless, so is the labor contained in it. The labor doesn't count as labor, and therefore creates no value. Well, this is common sense. If something is useless, you are not going to want to pay for it, neither by any material things nor by your labor. And if someone used their labor to do such a useless thing, well, you're gonna say, you wasted your labor. And he says it doesn't count as labor. But this is not only true for this extreme case. This is true also for any case. Labor is not unitary. So how are you going to solve this problem? He tries to walk around this problem by averaging the whole society. And then he runs into many other problems. And in the end, he cannot solve it. The thing he has put in there is full of tautologies. And, all these 1,500 pages of book, he talks about solutions like, I don't know, a couple of dozen pages maybe. Not even that many. The whole book is about criticism. Well, has put a nice criticism out there, but no solution. This whole work is about the critique. The title of the book is The Critique of Political Economy. But his name comes with other things, right? He is being told as the father of communism. Then you want to find how the communist economy works in his book. But it is not there. Not on those 1500 pages. Even Communist Manifesto has more to say about communism than Capital. And it's so repetitive. Everything is written 10 times. Like you read one passage, you go to the next, and then on the third passage you realize it's the same passage as the first one. It's painful to read this book, and in the end you get no reward. Only criticism. Only criticism. So at this point, I don't know which one is worse. Is it Karl Marx, who pretends to have a solution, but he actually didn't, and people who have followed him actually were fooled because they didn't read his book. They didn't know the solution wasn't there. And what did they do after all those revolutions? They had to become creative, come up with their own things. Maybe Keynes is worse, who liked to just decrease real wages so people would work more for less. So they would maximize the output of nation state, but uh, who cares about how it is all distributed in Keynesian world? In this channel, I'm going to criticize all these big names. I'm going to criticize Adam Smith. I'm going to criticize Karl Marx. I'm going to criticize John Maynard Keynes. This is my very first video and I had no preparation, pretty much. I was waiting for perfection to make my first video, but I've come to the realization that the moment is never coming, so I just, started. In 2020, 2021, 2022, I've been reading these books. I've seen no perfection. I've seen no solution. If you are following any economic ideology, you should not. You should work on a new theory. A new theory is needed. A new theory was needed. A theory has always been needed because we never had it. At one point, I was wondering why nobody talks about things like this. I stopped wondering. I realized not many people read these things. I mean, how many people read Wealth of Nations? How many people read Capital? How many people read both of these books? I mean, if you read Capital, but you didn't read Wealth of Nations, you wouldn't know about this. If you read Wealth of Nations, but you didn't read Capital, you wouldn't know about this. And even if you read both these books, but you didn't check for all the quotes in the book, I mean, I didn't check for all the quotes, but I checked whenever Marx quoted Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, because I read those two, so I could compare and see what has been going there. I'll see you next time.